Good morning. We're going to get started so that our speakers have adequate time to share their knowledge with you. My name is Amanda Leonard, and I'm a pediatric dietitian at Hopkins Children's Center, and I'm co-moderating with Molly Bigford, and she does adults at Corewell Health. I didn't write hers down. I have everyone else written down. I'm so sorry, Molly. In Michigan, in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And we're very excited today to talk to you about a new spin on classic CF nutrition care. We have a variety of speakers today who may or may not have slides, depending on what happens with the AV system. We're going to talk a little bit about the history of CF nutrition care and then move into patients that are not eligible for modulators and what do we do to help support that population. And then we're very lucky to have a person with CF here to talk to us at the end. So we're going to start with the first speaker is Suzanne Michel, who has been practicing in CF nutrition care since 1980. She's been at Hahnemann Medical College of Pennsylvania, CHOP, and now is at the Medical University of South Carolina. And she was presented with the CFF Golden Apple, which is an award for excellence in CF leadership and care. So she's going to talk to us about where we came from and where we're going. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Amanda, and thank you to the planning committee and to this group for inviting me to do this today. And when I started to think about this, I really wanted to go over the history of CF and the history of nutrition. And I wanted to go over the history of the CF Foundation. I put that talk together. That talk was an hour. But I will say for the history of CF nutrition, I found this wonderful site that took the history of CF decade by decade, and they named a lot of the people who've been around for a while know, like Paul Pencharves, Peter Dury. Anybody here from Toronto? No one from Toronto? They're from Toronto. And what I did notice, they didn't have many of the women who have done some of the basic research in CF. So how I see all of us is we're three generations of RDs. The first generation was started working in CF around the 1980s. And I'm happy to learn that I have two colleagues here from the 1980s, Katie and Susan Gemma. So that they started working in the 1980s. The second generation are a lot of the dietitians who are still working, but many are retiring, like Karen McGinnis from Raleigh, Judy Fulton from Pittsburgh and Denver, and Susan Casey from here in Washington, not D.C., in Seattle. This talk is for the third generation. Those of you who have not been in CF for 25 to 30 years. So let's get going, and I'm very worried about time, so I'm going to have to move quickly. So the CF Foundation was started in 1955. You always see that picture of the three boys. But what I learned when I did that deep dive, it was started in Philadelphia, and when I started working at Hahnemann, the physician in the office next to me had three children, two of whom had CF, who had died before I ever started working with him. He was one of the people who started it, so it became very, very near and dear to me. Their need was, we need to have people to care for our children. So they wanted to start the care centers. They wanted to start a registry. In that time, the first foundation leader was, I can't remember her name. I think it was Bugsy. The second leader, though, was Bob Dressing, and he did an amazing job of making the foundation fiscally solid. And then we moved on to Bob Bell. And if you didn't have a chance to meet Bob Bell, you really missed somebody. Bob Bell's purpose in life was to find a cure for CF and to find the CF gene. And in 1989, as you all know, the CF gene was discovered, and one of those who worked on it was Francis Collins, who's a great friend to the CF Foundation, but you know his name because he was the director of the NIH for years. He also has been honored by many business schools because he was the first foundation leader who put together foundations with pharmaceutical companies to find cures. And he's been honored many, many times for doing that. And you just see some of the things he worked on. But he also did things that affect you, all of you. He was a real believer in the multidisciplinary team. He felt the more disciplines you had around a table, the better your outcome would be. And so he was the one who insisted that CF centers have a multidisciplinary team. He started the CF conference, this very conference he started. And I was at the first one, and there were maybe 4 dietitians there. It wasn't that wonderful because it was brand new, and he was just learning the ropes. But there was no dietitian on the planning committee. So the dietitians got together, and there was no internet, there was no email, there was no Pediasure, which has nothing to do with this, but I just thought I'd throw that in. And so we wrote a letter. We typed it on a piece of paper, we folded it, we put it in an envelope, and we mailed it to Bob Bell. So since then, there have been dietitians on the planning committee. In 2003, quality improvement was started, and I hope a lot of you have taken advantage of quality improvement. What happened was Jerry O'Connor, who was a physician at Dartmouth and worked in QI and cardiovascular disease, looked at the registry data and said, this is outrageous. You have some centers that are just phenomenal and other centers that are horrible. And so quality improvement was started in 2003. If you're interested in a refresher or you're interested in learning, contact Kathy Sabadosa at the foundation, and she will work with you. Then we moved from consensus guidelines to evidence-based. And all I have to say about that is evidence-based is a much stricter way of looking at data. And when you read an evidence-based paper, you'll see the algorithm for how the papers were chosen. I forgot to bring my water up here. Is any of this good? Thank you. Okay. I'll give you mine. Yep. Thank you. And then I called Amanda, and I said to Amanda, so what's with the mentoring program? How did this get started? And she explained to me that she realized there were some very experienced dietitians out there, but there were also dietitians new to CF. And she contacted the foundation, who said, you find a partner and you start a mentoring program. So she and Terry Schindler were the original directors of the mentoring program. There have been 250 of you who have gone through this program. 101 are now mentors. Impressive. All right, let's talk about nutrition. And I have to go through this quickly. Dorothy Anderson, she was the one who in this country, I need to go the other way. She was the one in this country who identified cystic fibrosis. She recommended a low-fat, high-protein diet with over-the-counter vitamins. Not much in the history from 1930 to 50 because there just wasn't much being published. 1950, the life expectancy, 4 years and 11 months, we still had this high-protein, low-fat diet. We did not have non-enteric, we only had non-enteric-coated enzymes or powdered enzymes, no enteric-coated enzymes at all. And the recommendation was still for OTC vitamins. 1960, start of the interest in growth, which has continued today. There were case studies with very high levels of hyperproteinemia, and I had to put in Nancy Wang's name because she was at St. Christopher's in Philadelphia and really was quite a person when it came to studying growth. And she found that patients with CF height and weight was under the 10th percentile. And there was no adolescent growth spurt. And poor skeletal maturations continued into the 70s. And there was recognized a connection between respiratory disease and growth, but there were no standardized PFTs. So this wasn't that long ago. I mean, it was 1960. There was nothing out there. We still followed the low-fat diet. We now had 2 CF centers in 1961, and the patient registry started in 1966. Life expectancy in 1970s was now 16 years of age. And one thing when I did this deep dive, I learned about Douglas Crozier. Douglas Crozier was a physician in Toronto who had a very different way of caring for his patients with CF. And one of the things he did was he had his patients eat a high saturated fat diet. And they described it as eggs and butter and cheese. And he didn't care what GI problems they had. This is what he encouraged. And his patients took up to 100 codozyme a day. And I want you to remember his name because he has affected the way we treat patients. Enteric codeine mini tablets were introduced in the late 70s, really around 1979, because I started working in CF the month enteric-coated enzymes were launched. I knew nothing about a low-fat diet. I hadn't been taught anything about CF. I see these enzymes, they say you could eat fat, so that's what I learned. So by the end of the 1980s, survival was 30 years. Weight and linear growth was still a problem. Patients were still eating a low-fat diet. So over the last few years, when I'm sitting in sessions and I hear how challenged you are with your patients on modulators, gaining weight, and you can't change their diet, the same thing happened. So you're doing the reverse now, and I say, be patient. Patients would not move from non-fat milk to 1% to 2% to whole milk. They wouldn't add butter to things. They just were so used to the low-fat diet. So those of us working in this, we had to focus on the younger patients and patients who were willing to do this. Newborn screening was started in Wisconsin in 1980. Keep that in mind. And the interdisciplinary team started in 1980. I'm going to tell you about Target 100% Plus. I'm going to tell you about the Corey paper, and CF gene, as I said, was identified. So this is Target 100% Plus. And if anybody wants to keep a library of nutrition history, I am willing to get rid of it now. This was put together by McNeil, the people who did the first enteric-coated enzyme. I'm not sure who did the diet plan. The diet plan was just a high-calorie diet plan. It was not, filled with potato chips and sweets. It was just higher calorie with you on the other side with boosting that. Anybody want to look at this afterwards? I'm here with it. But that was our first direction for adding fat. They also had a video you'd give patients. This is the very famous Corey paper, Corey et al. And it was called the Toronto-Boston study, but it's really the Toronto and the rest of North America. And what you see here, is there a pointer? Thank you. So what you see here is percent surviving, and you can see at 30 years of age, the people in Toronto had more people surviving. When they went in to study this was not a nutrition paper. This paper, they looked at antibiotics, they looked at hospitalization, they looked at chest physiotherapy, they looked at everything. The bottom line, that Douglas Crozier, who was telling his patients to eat a high-fat diet, they weighed more. And so this was the first time that the CF community would realize, well, maybe there is a relationship between nutrition and outcome, even though as dietitians we had been saying this for years. So 1990, now we're getting up to current time, sort of. These are the drugs that were introduced, and they actually helped with nutrition because people didn't have such bad lung infection. There was improvement in weight. Newborn screening helped, but wasn't yet nationwide. We had the first CF consensus report. I'm going to talk to you about that. We had the first diabetes consensus report. The first multivitamin, chewable and liquid, was launched, and that company also had the first value-added program, which meant if you bought their enzyme, you got the vitamin for free. That was brand new. That was absolutely brand new. And we had the first transition from pediatric to adult centers. That was 1990. Before that, everybody was cared for at pediatric centers. We also had fibrosis colonopathy, and I'll talk about that. So on each paper, I'm going to tell you who the dietitians were on the paper. Elizabeth was at Mount Sinai in New York. Donna was at St. Christopher's in Philadelphia. And this was a consensus report. It was very comprehensive. It had nutrition management, and it also talked about anticipatory guidance. And I would just like to say that back in the day at these programs, we would have Lori Stark help us understand how to help parents make mealtime less stressful. And I know that I learned from her, and I also read a lot of Ellen Sater's work. And I know I'm going to recommend that we do that again. We have a session like that again at these meetings. Because not only will it help you with your patients, it will help you with patients who don't have CF, and it will help you with your own kids. So I really am putting a hard push for we need that again. So what they had in here was infants should follow the American, are you kidding me? The infants should follow the American Academy of Pediatrics, but then it was this whole 2 pages on how to increase calories. And when I reread it, I got tense. It was like, oh my God, we had such pressure on boosting calories. And I actually wrote that section. But that was because it was low calorie, low fat all the time. It was low fat all the time. So we were trying to teach those who cared for people with CF. I have to really move. This was the start of the legacy diet, and that was what I was supposed to talk about. This was the start of this diet, and I'm thinking, was this emphasis on weight? What did we do to the families by this constant emphasis on weight? And last night I was talking with our psychologist and our pediatrician, and we had a great discussion about this. Was this overemphasis on weight causing families to do things in terms of getting their kids to gain weight? And you can think about that. Fibrosis and colonopathy, have you heard about that? So this was Lila Becca, who went to the FDA and managed baby formula, but she had the first paper on vitamin K and CF where we learned our patients needed way more vitamin K. Dinah from Toronto, Karen, who's not here because she retired. And what was happening, patients were getting fibrosis and colonopathy. Some patients died. We were not given direction as to how much enzyme we should be giving to patients. We just would give them enzyme. But this paper also listed all the other reasons your patient might not be doing well with their stools. It could be anything, and you know what all those things are, so I'm not going to take that time. This was an important paper by Stacy Fitzsimmons, who was the statistician for the CF Foundation. It was in the New England Journal of Medicine. Look at the lipase units these patients were getting. So these were the patients who had fibrosis and colonopathy, and these were the patients who did not, getting massive amounts of enzyme. You know what you're doing now is much more under control. 2000, we still didn't have newborn screening. We had another consensus report, we had an adult consensus report, we had a bone, and now we had, at this time, like five different brands of CF-specific vitamins out there. So this report, look at all the dietitians who are on this report. Lots of dietitians on this report. And they didn't go into detail. They just said, get some fat in the diet to increase calories. And they also said you need nutrition anticipatory guidance. And then we had another paper in 2008, and this one was the result. The The weight recommendations in the previous paper were very complicated, and dietitians said, this isn't working, we need something else. So there were recommendations for energy, nutritional supplements, and again, behavioral intervention. But these were the slides, the graphs that came out of that, and you know these graphs. And I could speak for an hour on how these were developed. Clearly, I don't have time. This is the adult graph. You're all familiar with it. And then we have infant guidelines, quite good, but again, dated. And finally, 2010, finally, newborn screening is nationwide. Finally. Let me skip through some of these. We had some new drugs. These are important slides. For those of us who worked in CF before newborn screening, this is what patients look like. I can't emphasize it enough. This is exactly what patients look like. And they had powdered enzymes, and this little girl was lucky that she did well with powdered enzymes. I mean, it was just awful. I mean, these poor kids were so malnourished, and you had to start at a negative point to get them into the positive area. It was so awful. And this little boy, notice the reference, Amanda. The legal department at the foundation made me find a reference. But look at this little boy. When you look at them, look at their hair even now. Look at your patient's eyes. Look at their nose. Look in their mouth. You know, there's no subcutaneous fat here. I know when I was seeing patients, I would always greet them like this, and that would give me a sense without doing skin folds. I don't know if you can see here. These are skin folds, a result of no subcutaneous fat. You see this? Look at his abdomen. And if he turned to the side, he'd probably have scapular winging. And life was so hard for us because this is what patients look like. And now we have newborn screening, and we don't have that. Vitamin D, and the important thing in this paper is Table 3, which gives you routine supplementation, step 1, step 2, and then refer. I think I'm getting almost to the end. Oh, look, Katie and Amanda and Amy have this wonderful paper on enteral tube feeding, and they can talk to you about that. And now, in 2020, weight status is comparable to the general public, but height is not. We have normal weight obesity, which it took me a while to wrap my head around that. And yesterday, we had some wonderful presentations about how do you measure body fat, muscle. Is it BMI alone? I think we're learning that might not be it. And you had some wonderful presentations yesterday about that. I just want to put in a plug for all of these dietitians who were involved in the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. And I do want to say I did want to bring in some of the international guidelines. Again, no time, but the European group has a very new guideline from 2024 for nutrition. So where are you going? All these papers I showed you. Now you have to figure out what you're going to do in terms of modulators. You have to rewrite all these papers and guidelines. We need new guidelines, which are going to eventually be coming. And I'm going to encourage you to volunteer for committees when things go out that they need volunteers. If you have ideas, contact the foundation. And I do have to say, back in the day, it was easy to contact the foundation because you had Bob Bell, Caroline McPherson, or Leslie Hazel. And you could call any of those three. Now it's much bigger. And be inquisitive, but also keep thinking about how we approach patients about weight, either to lose weight or to gain weight, and this emphasis that this legacy diet put on weight. And I did it not too bad, just 3 minutes over.
Thank you.
I could have talked to you for an hour.
And Suzanne even left us with a few minutes for questions. If you're in the room and you have a question, please go to the mic, or you can enter the questions on your app. Good job, Suzanne.
Hi, I just wanted to say You brought up the mentoring program, and just to point out to everybody in the room, that was Amanda's brainchild. She deserves credit for it. So not only did she bring that to the dietitians, but it was such a success with the dietitians that the foundation rolled that out to every other discipline. So it was the dietitians who started the mentoring program, and Amanda led all of that. I just tagged along. She did all of the work.
Terry did a lot of work.
She did it all. So bravo to Amanda. And it just, I think just goes to show the power of dietitians in a community too, and what we can achieve together, and how important that is to work on projects together and get our voices heard on the foundation level and across the world.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you. And what I wanted to say was how Amanda found that. She was on a benchmarking committee. And that's another 10 minutes. What is a benchmarking committee? What was she doing on that committee? What did that committee find? So at another time, we'll go into that.
We have 30 seconds left. And I do want to say, I agree with Suzanne. I did benchmarking. You visit other centers, and sometimes the dietitian was brand new and they're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And then you go visit someone like Katie, like who's been doing it, or Suzanne. And I just said to the CEO at the time, hey, could we somehow get them together? And he said, come up with a plan. And then we presented it. So I think that they really are open to our ideas. We just have to figure out a way to find the right person to talk to.
And thank you for holding on to your seats as I ran through all of that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne. This one? This one. Okay. All right. I'm going to present our next speaker, Liz Reed. Liz has been working in CF for 19 years, first with peds and adults at Hershey Medical Center, and now is working solely in pediatrics at CHOP. She says she does miss working with adults. Liz is super humble. She's been on a million committees and done a million things, but she didn't want to list them. So thank you for being here today, Liz.
Security. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much to Amanda and Molly for inviting me to speak. Just another word. When I first came to CF in 2006, I was an experienced dietitian, and I actually thought I was a pretty decent RD, but I was new to CF, and I did not know what I did not know. And I absolutely panicked. And I think I reached out to Terry. I met Amanda. I kind of like glommed onto them and said, help me. And I was in the pilot mentoring program, and it was fabulous. Suzanne Michelle was my mentor. But anyway, welcome to CF for anyone who's new, and I hope I have something to offer you. That what I'm going to talk about is nutritional care for people with CF not taking CFTR modulators. I have no relationships to disclose, and I hope to teach you something. I know we have something to teach each other, so I have some ideas, and I hope I don't run over so people can share their ideas as well. And my objective is to look at the unique nutritional needs of people living with CF and just describe some strategies to promote lung function and nutritional well-being. So eating should be one of the greatest pleasures in life. And I want to make that true for our caregivers and people with CF, but it's not always that easy. So who are we talking about today? There's about 10% of people, either because of their variants or because they're intolerant to modulator therapy or they're not responding, they're in this 10% category. People with class 1 mutations have a higher incidence of meconium ileus at birth, which may predispose them to some nutrition-related issues. They may have more significant CF lung disease, elevated caloric requirements, likely to be pancreatic insufficient, require sodium supplementation from birth, need extra nutrients. And we also have to recognize that they're going to have a higher burden of treatment. So they may spend 1 to 4 hours taking care of not only their CF, but other comorbidities such as CFRD. We know this slide well, so we've been focusing on this, and I won't focus on it much. I usually call that the why I have a job slide. But now we're looking beyond BMI. We're recognizing that there's some other important relationships, and I just want to call out Jessica Alvarez for the image on the left and Rosara Bass for the image on the right. Did my work for me. Just showing that there is a reduced muscle mass. And so we may have someone with a normal BMI, but they have a higher body fat and they have a lower muscle mass, what we call normal weight obesity. There is a strong correlation, a stronger correlation than BMI with lean body mass. So we really want to promote that. And there's a negative correlation with lung function and fat mass. And then in preparation for this talk, I spoke to many people who don't qualify for modulators, just as many as I could find, and as many essays, and I highly recommend all of the essays on the CF Foundation website if you really want to find out what people are thinking about. This quote that someone emailed me really summed it up. Candidly, many of the nutrition recommendations for me growing up did not resonate because the emphasis on calories, fat, and protein, no matter what their source, seemed so short-sighted, and there was such a focus on weight that bred very unhealthy body image issues. And I do want to just put in a little bit of a defense for us, just because, as you saw in those slides and that story that Suzanne so beautifully unfolded, this really was a time when we recognized that survival and lung function really hinged on creating that sturdier body mass. So I think sometimes our well-meaning message maybe didn't always land as we hoped it would, with great concern. And so I try, and I'm also, one of my interests is body image and disordered eating. So I tried to come up with some ideas today, so how we can focus on nutritional well-being, but not always focus on the numbers on the scale. Because some people are not triggered by numbers. I have some people that come in and they want to know all the numbers, but then I have other people who are really triggered by numbers. I think I would be one of them. So one thing, Amanda, yesterday you were talking about aiming for tall and sturdy. I always try to promote this, and I borrowed something from Nancy Clark, the famous sports nutritionist you may or not have heard of, but she talks about athletes being in the power zone, but we all want to be in the power zone. Every time I see an article on flow, how to get in flow, I'm reading it, So I think the people that we work with are the same. They just want to know how to be them best selves, at their best selves, and have energy for the things that they're interested in life. So we all know these guidelines. Suzanne just reviewed them. And really, that legacy diet, I have to say, I don't think I ever promoted it in clinic, but I think many of my families followed it because it's highly palatable. And now we really are trying to switch over to something that is healthier and emphasizes foods associated with positive health outcomes in the general population. I think that may be a quote from Katie McDonald in that Academy article. Yeah. The other thing that I have to consider is what's going on. You know, I think everybody would eat well if they had the time and energy and, you know, depending on how they feel. So this study really caught my eye. It was sponsored by a group, Emily's Entourage. Emily is the lead author. And this study surveyed people and talked about, and especially people who did not qualify for modulators, what were their main issues. And you can see that GI issues were first on that list. And there's some other things here that may interfere with appetite, may interfere with mood, may interfere with how you feel about getting yourself something to eat. And here's a more comprehensive list, just of different things, including food insecurity, because we know a third of our patients may have food insecurity. So we do screen for that. But there's lots of issues, medical issues on this list. So how do we, the other thing I want to recognize then, that there definitely is a high mental load that comes with CF care. So when I come into the room, to talk about nutrition, I want to make sure that everyone is going to be recognizing that I am trying to partner, that I am not there to give a handout. I am there to try to see where they're at. And actually, they may be really concerned with their Pseudomonas infection that day or some other potential issue, and it may not be the ideal time for me really to talk about their weight. I have to say there's one person that I talked to who broke my heart. He really liked his dietitian, and I'm going to talk, of course, about calorie boosting, but he said that one day he came to clinic, he had lost quite a bit of weight, and everybody was very concerned and very, very focused on making sure that he gained that weight back. But he had lost all that weight because he was heartbroken, because he was having horrible problems in his marriage, and nobody really asked how he was doing or noticed, like, how sad he was. And so that was the issue that really needed to be addressed that day. I also, I need to recognize, who do my patients think I am, We see this every nutrition month, but it's like, who do they think I am? And what do they think I have to offer them? So I often ask, have you ever worked with a nutritionist before? And what did you like about it? And what did you not like about it? And what can I do for you? How can I help? And I have to thank everyone who's transferred patients to me, because many of you have done an awesome job. And people will say, I want to continue. I really liked when my RD, challenged me to add more foods, or when she gave me recipes, or these kinds of recipes, and so I try to continue those things. So illuminate and elevate just is another way of saying this. These are some ideas to boost calories. So illuminate, meaning let's look at that individual and see what's going on with them, where they are, if they're having any GI issues, if they're having any mental health issues, and how, if they need to gain weight or they're interested in gaining weight, how I can partner with them. So consistency, oftentimes I find people will say, I eat 3 meals a day and 2 to 3 snacks, but that may or may not be there. Nutrition supplements we all know about, and they are convenient, and they can be great if they're covered by insurance. But there's some other things. If I have people who are having a lot of malabsorption, I may go for a structured lipid, such as Encala or Serocal, but they have a strong taste. So I've had some patients that have been highly successful using it with tube feedings, and also using it with peanut butter. Mighty Milk, you can also make Mighty Milk into hot cocoa. You can make golden milk. You can add spices. Just make sure there's nothing that interferes with any medications, because patients may want to add other things that they learn about on TikTok. Homemade smoothies, bread dipped in olive oil and seasonings, and other appropriate additions. So for GI ideas, of course, just optimizing PERT. Protein is a really trendy nutrient right now, and I get a lot of people interested in taking their enzymes more consistently. If I tell them that they're only going to absorb 50% of the protein that they want to get swole. Looking at GERD, looking at constipation. One thing for constipation, oftentimes I partner with our CFGI practitioners and positioning. It's all about the positioning, making sure their feet are flat on the floor or on some kind of raised stool. Are they swallowing secretions? That can cause problems. There was an excellent session yesterday on bloating. If you weren't able to be there, I highly recommend looking at that recording. But just looking at functional GI issues, and if there's something that can be addressed medically, and then something that may be need to be addressed in the mind-body realm. Prebiotic and probiotic foods can also help with intestinal issues. Lots of times I'll key in, I'll have people who are experiencing some kind of depressed mood, or maybe they're studying for their SATs, or maybe they're just trying to have a better junior year in high school or college or life or work. And so talking about eating for their brain, cognition, is much nicer than talking about boosting calories for their weight. And there's a lot of good material there with fat. Just making sure that people are adequately hydrated. Excuse me. Start drinking early. I often recommend that people drink some fluid before they leave the house, like at least a cup, maybe working up to a liter. And then I am not below recommending fat-soluble vitamins and healthy fats for hair, skin, and nails. Sometimes it helps to really look at the membranes in the brain and see where those fatty acids go. That if you want your thoughts to flow, you need more flexible fats. So it's just one thing that works for some people. And also, protein is important for neurotransmitters. Building cooking skills. I start early. I always ask kids if they know how to cook anything. There's some great resources out there. YouTube's great, just looking at basic skills. Family Freezer's great. It's kind of a paid site, but she has lots of free recipes where you can make things. Oftentimes, if people have like joint issues and they have problems chopping, she just uses a lot of spices in her recipes, but you create these things that go in a gallon freezer bag. It can be silicone or whatever. And you stack them in your freezer, and then you put them in an Instant Pot or a crock pot to cook. The Family Dinner Project is a great resource. We have some online cooking classes. A shout out for Nicholas Kelly, who is an RD living with CF. He has a cookbook out, No Need for Seconds. And I also look at cooking equipment because that can be expensive. It's like, but you don't need a whisk to, scramble eggs. You can use a fork. Also, like thrift shops are a great place to get cooking things. Sharp knives, though, can be a problem. Okay, we talked a little bit about screening for food security. There's some great resources on the website. We partner with our social workers, look for those scarce resources to help, and recognizing that everybody has a story, and especially with CF, 20% of our patients may get a big operation on their birthday, and that may not be that scar to them may be a source of pride, or it may not. It's an invisible disease. Not everybody struggles with weight. There are some people who are embarrassed. They say, I don't look sick, but really I have to spend 4 hours a day on these treatments, and people don't cut me a break. You can't tell by looking at somebody if they have a body image disturbance or not. And if somebody has a better self-image, they're going to take better care of themselves. The other thing to recognize is how our thoughts about ourselves, our attitudes towards food, it starts early. children are little sponges. They internalize all of those messages. If mom or dad or Aunt Susie or someone they care about is always dieting, always talking about good food, bad food, always talking about, I hate the way my, whatever looks. I always caution parents just to say positive things about their bodies, how their bodies work, what a miracle they are. I love Jess Sims, if anyone does Peloton. I mean, every time I'm laying on the floor and I'm a disaster because I haven't been able to keep up with her, she says, say thank you to your body, so just promoting. And I'm like, okay, thank you, body. But that just brings in that we really need to promote that positive self-image and positive talk to our bodies and food as well. So just when we're talking to people, it's so great to say, it's so good to see you. We don't really need to comment about their appearance. And here's some other things just that are non-appearance-based compliments. And also, I forgot to mention, you should have a handout of all of my slides. I tweak them, so they may not be in order, but it should be in the app. Some other resources on disordered eating. I'm going to leave you with this quote from Maya Angelou, that people sometimes forget what we say, but they know how they feel about us. They know that if we're somebody that they can trust with things that they're worried about. So I want to be that person. Now, I don't always know how I'm perceived, but I still work at being that person. Okay, I got references and questions.
We have about 6 minutes for questions or any stories that anybody wants to share.
Please share.
And you can also put them in the app. But while we're waiting, what is in golden milk?
Butter?
Ginger, turmeric, and honey. You can make it with, you know what it is. Are you shaking your head or do you think it sounds good? You know what it is. Oh, okay.
Is it hot?
You can make it hot. I think it's best hot. Yeah, but the thing is that you can tweak the recipe. You can add cinnamon to it if you want. Like, you can do a lot of things with it, and I think it's appealing. It's all over TikTok, Amanda. I don't do TikTok either. I do Instagram, but.
I'm too old for that.
Does it taste good?
It tastes
Someone asked if
excellent.
it tastes good.
What do you think? Have you tried it? Yeah, it's really
Adam
good.
agrees it tastes delicious.
Yeah.
That was really good, Liz. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wait, we have a question coming.
Thanks, Liz. That was a great talk. And I think it's great for the dietitian at the clinic to, be on board with this. But how do you get the rest of your center on board? I think is my
That's
struggle.
a work in progress. So one of my favorite team members who just incredible nurse, force of nature, would often go into a clinic room, and we do multidisciplinary visits. So, not everybody has a place to sit. And so she would come in and say, oh, I'll stand because it burns more calories. And, pull her aside and say, really, I don't think that's a great image for our families, But I think that's why, and sometimes we forget ourselves. I have to say I'm not perfect every day. So just continuing to raise awareness is an ongoing job.
I had one other comment. When you were talking about all the ways that things that nutrition does for you besides weight gain, I feel like that would be a great handout or like a resource to have available for families. We can put hair, skin, and nails on there, how it helps with your brain, so that I love the idea of saying we're not just trying to get you to gain weight. We want to make you, make your body work better.
Yeah. When I talk about hydration, I often ask people, because there's some people, they just don't like to drink. But if you say to a young adolescent boy, do you watch what's happening on the sidelines of your favorite sport team? They hire people to come and squirt Gatorade in their mouths. Because what happens when you're underhydrated and you don't have enough, electrolytes and sodium in your system is that you're make bad decisions, you're going to miss that play, and you're more likely to get injured. So.
I was going to give a plug for an answer to that question. Is Shannon Stamper in the room? No? Okay. So in 2022, I think she came home from conference and they wrote a paper that they showed to their physicians. It may be on the listserv now. I don't know where it is, but it's a very good, evidence-based document. And I guess I'll also give a plug for my talk later today, with some more data that you can take forward. Now, there's a bias that is built into all of us and it triggers a lot of cognitive dissonance. So just be patient, but coming back to we're just trying to help patients.
Thank you. And just if anybody talks to Shannon, could she please repost that? So
You could also probably Google Stamper 2022 CF nutrition and it should pop up.
So not really a question, but more of a thank you. I also work in eating disorder care for a lot of teens who are not CF, but I think it's important as things change to be really cognizant of how our words can impact people. Because I've worked with folks who are 70 years old and have had an eating disorder, and I've got kids as young as 9. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Liz.
Moving right along, our next speaker, theoretically moving right along, is Dr. Katie McDonald, who's been working in CF for 36 years. She works at Primary Children's in Utah, and her main focus is individualized care for CF and also preventing long-term consequences of CF. And I think it's very interesting that during her career, the long-term consequences have really changed or evolved. So she's going to talk to us about nutritional care. Oh, no, she's not, because that's Liz.
It's the third one.
I was doing too many things at once. Right here? No, up. McDonald. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that one.
I do better when I don't multitask. I'm a unitasker. Okay, targeting malnutrition in people with CF. Thank you, Katie.
Is there? Put this here. Oh. I hand wrote my script. I'm going to put it right here.
I'll keep it safe.
And just talk. Because I did go over this. I am so delighted to be on this podium to speak with you today among so many friends and familiar faces and those of you that we're not friends yet. So we're looking forward to it. But I had a lot of fun with this and sort of. So does the legacy CF diet still have a role? I have no relationships. And, I really want to think about the potential gaps between the causes of malnutrition and the potential remedies offered by the CF legacy diet. I want to say, as you've gathered from the previous excellent speakers, this is a cautionary tale. Oh, my slides, they didn't look like that before. Yeah, but you could read it. Anyway, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. That's attributed to many different people. I'm going to attribute it to my paternal grandmother, who told me that a lot. So 1989, a pivotal year, and notable in general fashion. Big hair, shoulder pads, lots of spandex. The Simpsons started on TV. George H.W. Bush was inaugurated as president. World Wide Web, brand new. The Berlin Wall opened, and, Taylor Swift. It was a pivotal year in CF. The expected age of survival for CF. Now, this had doubled in the last 20 years. And the previous speakers, Liz and Suzanne, have talked about this. And I don't know about you, but even 36.7 years, way too young. Way too young. lung transplant was the great hope for the future of people with CF when I started with CF. That was where people really thought things were going. And has been acknowledged already, the F508del gene was discovered by a collaborative international effort. And, we really thought that the cure, a definitive cure for CF, was right around the corner. Well, anyway. So 1989, as has been mentioned, Suzanne said, we were really working with the low-fat, high-protein diet, lots of MCT oil, nasty stuff, in my opinion. But this is what we were working with. And if you know people with CF who are older people with CF, they may still be following this low-fat diet. Some of them could never really make the change over. And it was thought that because people with CF had these voracious appetites, that they could gain weight and grow normally, and that would be fine. And as mentioned, not all clinics use the low-fat diet. The growth and survival for Toronto clinics, a 9-year survival advantage. And this is a quote from the paper, from this paper by Corey. They didn't really say in this paper, high-fat diet. They just said, don't restrict fat in the diet for people with CF. Again, it goes back to what Liz was saying, what is said and what is perceived, not always quite the same thing. Very slowly after 1989, and it's important to note that the perception for a lot of people was that it's not the weight that drives the pulmonary function. If you have good pulmonary function, then you're going to weigh an average amount. You're going to do well. And malnutrition, of course, you want to avoid, because people who are malnourished, they get pneumonia, they die. But there was no real connection that had been drawn between the idea that nutrition could impact pulmonary function. By 2008, the median survival age had increased to about 38 years. Now that was kind of creeping along. That is not the, steep curve that we wanted to see in that. And this is from the CF Foundation. From that, there was a real impetus to do anything that could be considered to look at nutrition, to look at improving that pulmonary function, to increasing that age of survival. This first sentence on here, good evidence that higher intake resulted in improved weight gain. That's kind of a duh, but this is the infamous paper that has already been discussed about 110 to 200% of energy needs. This was key. Now, I think, for this article that was authored primarily by Dr. Virginia Stallings, but, a large group participated in this, and they looked at the evidence that was available. Behavioral intervention, oral or enteral supplements in addition to usual intake. There was insufficient evidence for specific nutrient or dietary pattern recommendations. I would say that's still true, that there still is insufficient evidence. And all of this would have gone pretty much under the radar. Those of us who are reading it was then the Journal of the American Dietetic Association, now the Journal of the Academy. We were looking at it, but it was kind of a narrow audience. But there was something else in this that caught the attention of more people. And both of the other speakers have talked about this, the relationship between FEV1 percentile and BMI. And I remember being in Philadelphia at that table in a little Italian restaurant. And Suzanne, there's some of us who were there. Bruce Marshall came in with a folder, some papers, and he put those down on the table and he said, I want you to look at this. And I think all of us gasped, jumped, and said, we told you so, Bruce Marshall. But how remarkable. And when we talk about weight gain for people with CF, we're really not talking about weight gain because that's, neither here nor there. We're talking about pulmonary function. Pulmonary function is the indicator, the strongest indicator of survival for people with CF. And that's what we're talking about. So people get kind of hung up on the weight, but it was this pulmonary function that was really driving that. And I think now, when so many people have pretty good pulmonary function, we forget that. This is the graphs for the children. And you can see the youngest children are at the top, the oldest children are at the bottom for FEV1 and BMI. You can see this is a progressive disease. These are the graphs from the 2008 papers. If you look at the graphs that are now published in the CF Registry Patient Report, those are a lot closer together. People are doing better. Liz mentioned this also. Medical nutrition therapy emphasized high nutrient density foods. If you go back, and you were to look at the programs for the NACFC and, dietitian, discipline specific meetings, every year it was about high nutrient density foods. How are we going to do this? But this was very much like a game of telephone. So, we're talking high nutrient density foods, good nutrition. And the message that's coming out the other end is, like the telephone game, very different. It was gain weight, forget good nutrition, just gain weight. And again, with that background being, we're trying to get better pulmonary function. So, the legacy high-fat, high-calorie diet, concepts that were based on short-term survival, not always on long-term consequences. We looked at consumption of high-calorie, nutrient-poor foods and beverages. I have a particular problem with processed meats, but I didn't put that on there. Trained overconsumption and disregard for fullness cues. Lacked focus on quality or nutrient density of dietary intake. Ignored most general human dietary health principles. And it was a generalized, one-size-fits-all recommendation. Everybody with CF does this. Potentially predisposed people with CF to diet-related complications later in life. And it was almost like people with CF were dietary aliens who could really ignore the dietary advice for any other human on the planet. And people kind of gloried in that, I think, for some of it. Took it with pride. It was a perk of having CF, that you could eat anything, that you could go through 3 pounds of bacon in a week. You could buy 2 Costco cheesecakes per week and eat those. I don't know. But does it really justify the means? So, as I said, the urgency to promote improved pulmonary function really drove this emphasis. Therapeutic breakthroughs that were on the horizon were likely to maintain lung function. Remember, this is years ago, but regaining lost lung function might not be possible. So was there a benefit? And I would like to say, I think that there was. Now, were there a lot of other things that were going on with CF? Other therapies, different medications, and so much being learned all of the time. But when you look at these graphs, and what these are telling us, if you take all of the median FEV1 for all of the centers in the United States by year, compare it to the median BMI percentile for all of the 50 states, and line it up, you'll see a steady climb for both children, which has the red dots, and for adults. And this is all pre-modulator. So I do think that this emphasis, however misguided, however limited, to look at just BMI, certainly we know better now. We've learned. But I think it did make an impact, and I think that we kind of have to own that too. It wasn't, I don't want to defend the legacy diet, and I've gone to great lengths to say nasty things about it. But on the other hand, there was some good work that happened with this. Did I go backwards? Sorry. And so this fills in the box of the graph that we looked at before. And this goes for the median predicted survival age, 1989 through 2023. And I've listed on here, I did put in, well, that's what you get when you change your slides. It should back up to like about here. But still, we've seen some real improvements, and we should be proud of that. So are there potential benefits of the CF legacy diet, the high fat, high calorie? And I think that there is still some consideration of using this for people who don't have access to highly effective modulators and or struggling to gain weight, because there are still people. Situations of food shortages or food insecurity, maybe what we're going to see in the next couple of weeks, if our food stamp and WIC programs are not available. So there are some things. However, high fat, high calorie intake does not mandate low nutrient density. So I have a cautionary tale of unintended consequences, perhaps. So the 1968 guidelines recommend low-fat diet to manage symptoms. And it's really a recipe for malnutrition. And you look at some of the pictures like Suzanne was showing, and we forget that people with CF looked like that. There was one girl early in my career, and she was 18. She had end-stage lung disease. She was so thin that she was in the hospital. Little kids on the medical unit were scared of her because they thought she was a walking skeleton. Anyway, that was kind of the thing. So the CF legacy diet to promote weight gain for pulmonary advantage, yes, it may predispose people who have consumed the low nutrient density. You might be looking at long-term diet-related health issues. Currently, in people with CF on these highly effective modulators, low-fat diets or higher-fat diets with limited or non-existent PERT to control weight gain, does that put us back to those 1968 guidelines? And an example from my clinic. So I've been very fortunate to be able to partner with a researcher from ARUP Laboratories to look at fatty acid deficiencies in people with CF. This study has been submitted for publication. I was hoping that I would be able to tell you it's been accepted, but it hasn't. But fatty acid deficiencies, long recognized, especially prevalent in class 1, 2, 3 genotypes, the ones associated with pancreatic insufficiency, multifactorial etiology. And, potentially you could benefit from higher fat intake and improved PERT management. Most people with CF do not exhibit clinical symptoms of EFAD, but there are these insidious, adverse, long-term subclinical EFAD outcomes, including an increased prevalence of CF-related liver disease, worsened pulmonary exacerbations, and worsened disease severity and progression overall. So from our research, looking at modulators for kids, CF modulators, including the highly effective ETI, do not appear to normalize fatty acid profiles in CF, in people with CF. So the cautionary tale here is, if we think that people with CF and one of these severe mutations, the pancreatic insufficient mutations, that they are able to eat a very low-fat diet, that may exacerbate the problem. We need to think carefully about that. And so maybe considering individualized nutrition therapy and figure who's at high risk for this. Identify those genotypes, screen routinely, they should be supplemented with linoleic acid sources, perhaps the inline immobilized lipase cartridges, the Reliasorb, or the structured lipids like the Ancala. Perhaps there would be a role for this. Does everybody need this? No, they don't. But what our job would be, and this is just one example of many things, but for us to figure out who needs this and then approach it. This is really the key of the legacy CF diet. And this part we do need to continue to embrace. This is core to all of us. This is what's in our hearts. Optimization of nutrition, of growth and nutritional status is essential for effective treatment of individuals with cystic fibrosis. If we carry anything forward from this legacy CF diet, I hope it's this. I hope that it would be the enthusiasm for nutrition intervention for people with cystic fibrosis, and the sincere commitment that it does make a huge difference for people with CF. Thank you. And I have some references. Most of them old references, but references nonetheless. Thank you. I'd be delighted to take any questions.
While people are walking to the microphone, we have a question from Jamie Moser. How often do you recommend checking EFA levels?
Thank you, Jamie. That's a really good question. I think, first of all, to know your population, it's probably more important to do it for people with the Delta F508. And I think it would be a good idea in infancy to check this, to check it, again, for people with the Delta F508. There aren't guidelines for this, and so I'm making this up. But it's hard too, because as we have checked some of the levels in our clinic, what do you do about it? And it's been hard to treat, really hard to treat. But I think, especially if you identify a deficiency, probably no longer than 6 months, to look at it. But I think in times of like growth failure for kids, consider this. If there are other problems going on, I would keep checking. Again, a fabulous opportunity for research. And I hope more can be done. I hope that answers your question, Jamie. It was kind of a non-answer.
I'm really...
Hi, Liz.
Hi. I am really glad for this discussion about essential fatty acids because this is one of the areas that I think we really need to pay attention to. And that was my question. Like if you check annually, because I think it's not.
No, we don't.
Right.
But
So-
we should.
Well, I'm just wondering because it's not only people who are having a hard time gaining weight, but I'm wondering if we have people with depressed mood.
Absolutely.
They're really essential nutrients. Fat is a much bullied nutrient, but it is
It is
essential.
bullied. I agree. It is very much bullied. Nasty things are said about fat intake. The other thing is if you eat a high saturated fat diet, you still won't get the essential fatty acids that you need. And so choosing the type of fat and being very selective and targeted in your approach, I think is going to be essential. And that's, all of my friends here in the room, go forward, and think deeply about these things.
Yeah. I have one more comment.
Yes,
because
please.
I have seen essential fatty acid deficiency in people who take their PERT perfectly.
Sure.
So,
Absolutely.
I think there's some kind of modifier that we just don't know yet. And again, thank you for this research.
You're welcome. Look for the paper.
Okay, I will. And
We're
one more
hoping for the
comment
best. Yeah.
is that sometimes in our patients on modulators, and of course, we have seen people with hair loss. And Kimberly Stevenson has pointed out that sometimes it's not the modulator, it's essential fatty acid deficiency.
I agree.
So just to leave that from
I
Kimberly.
agree.
I don't know if she's in the room. There she is.
Yes, an astute observation, I believe. Hi.
So actually, I want to comment on that because we have seen hair loss in some of our patients on modulators, but it never would have occurred to me to think fatty acid deficiency because if it's worsening on the modulator, it wouldn't occur to me to think essential fatty acid deficiency. But good
Because
point.
we think, modulators, they cure everything.
Well, actually, we thought the modulator is causing the hair loss.
Yeah.
But actually, we just drew a fatty acid panel for one of our patients on the modulator. But so actually, my thought was,
Oh, how was it, by the way?
it didn't come back yet. It just happened like last month. So
Yeah.
But I guess my thought was, now that you've just said like maybe we should be drawing them more consistently on our patients, we have added more labs to our regular labs like the lipid panels and an iron panel, just because we feel like those are something that we felt like we needed to check more consistently. But I was thinking, should this be something that we're checking more in, I guess, in my adults, since these are the patients that I'm seeing and are making changes on their own sometimes. And
Correct.
I do have a patient that stopped her enzymes on the modulator, refused to do a fecal elastase and refused to restart her enzymes because she's asymptomatic. I guess for me, that's someone I would think might be a good person to check. But do you feel like it's something that we should check on, I guess, anyone that's making their own adjustments in their enzymes or,
I do.
or, I guess lowering their dose slightly or really should we be checking it on everyone?
Going back to a very low fat diet or, and I think, a good old fashioned diet history, diet recall, to look at, what are they eating?
Yeah.
How are they doing this? I do think that we have to be smart in asking for these essential fatty acid panels. If it's somebody who is, a genotype that is pancreatic sufficient, not somebody who says I'm pancreatic sufficient now because I take it, and we've got lots of those, but, to look at those, and to really, think about who we're asking for these levels, and then following them carefully. And that's the targeted intervention that, I think that's our path forward.
And I guess my other thought would be like, what about insurance coverage? Whereas I've gotten pushback from insurance, just getting a second vitamin D level in the year because, why are we getting another vitamin D level, which I think is absolutely ridiculous in a person with CF.
Well, of course it is. Of course it is. But yeah, I agree with you. And I think that, in these meetings in the future that these will be, I predict that these are going to be some of the topics that, that we really have to hash through, and work at. Yes.
Real quick, there was a question on the app about insurance coverage, which Kim alluded to, but the question from Stephanie Wells was, is the essential fatty acid, is the lab panel covered by insurance?
I don't know. I just recommend them. I mean,
You have to have an appropriate diagnosis code.
You have to have a diagnosis code. Terry said you have to have a diagnosis code.
I was going to caution people about getting these levels on everybody. There's a difference between essential fatty acid deficiency, and there's an imbalance in omega-3 and omega-6 levels, which is different. And they've done multiple studies trying to change that ratio, and they've all been unsuccessful. So, when you're talking about that, certainly we can provide recommendations for dietary intake, but we've not successfully been able to change that ratio. So
no, and I think you make an excellent point. In the study that I discussed, it was a study. We were able to get those labs. We normally don't. And the insurance company or the insurance coverage absolutely is a consideration.
so I think, looking at high risk populations, I would not check those levels on everybody.
No, I wouldn't either. Not on everybody.
And babies, it takes a lot of blood to get those levels. So you have to be very careful with how much blood you're taking. from an infant.
we were able to work with ARUP, which, for us is just, a stone's throw across the research park. But they were able to get micro draws.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. And so that was one of the things that, it would have been a deal breaker if we had to do, those large
So
amounts.
just for other people that can't get access to that, I would just, and wait at least 6 months, because you're drawing a lot of blood out of babies if you're doing it sooner.
Yeah. But do ask for what's the least amount of blood that we can do, and I think for any pediatric, lab draw, that's a fair question, an essential question. Yes.
So I'm a CF mom of a 17-year-old that just started a modulator in January for the first time. And I've been hearing about, I'm just wondering what nutritionally I can do to slow her liver disease, and if you have ideas about that.
Well, that's a whole nother ball game.
I know. But I don't know, just something.
Just,
throw out.
I would look for, sources. I would look at sources of linoleic acid, and you can just Google it, and start adding those. It's the omega-6 that you need, not the omega-3. And the fish oil is great, or the flaxseed oil is great, but that's not necessarily, to look for like safflower oil. And I think that, I don't know, because I don't know your child's particular, history or needs or things, but it would be a benign intervention, just to add that. It might help. Maybe. I would say it's worth a try. I'd do it. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Oh, yes.
We do have time for a few more, Katie.
Oh, okay.
Just
Yes, please.
Actually tagging on to that, I was wondering, since I'm sure that, as you say, the essential fatty acid, I'm thinking of one kid in particular, it would be a send out. God forbid insurance wouldn't cover it. I'm wondering if you could just treat it empirically.
Absolutely. I would.
What you just recommended, basically.
Yeah. No, I have, because, and granted, I'm not in clinical practice since I retired 2 years ago. But yeah, absolutely, to try and think about it and to be like a detective, to put it together and say, this child has a lot of risk factors. This child has, he's homozygous delta 508.
He's not growing. He's on a tube feeding.
This and this and this.
Yeah.
Let's try it.
Yeah. Couldn't hurt. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
So, yeah, it's a low risk intervention.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Hi, I'm also a CF mom.
There you are. Sorry, I couldn't see. I beg your pardon. Pardon me.
So this is what our CF appointment looks like. We have like different team members, they come. like, and it's already like 3 hours
Yes.
long.
Yeah.
But, we kind of do need, and as we have already established how nutrition plays such an important role in the growth and to stay well in general too. I mean, how do we get more time with our nutritionists? Because we don't do the diet recalls anymore or anything because the person, she would just come in, she would just look at her levels like, oh, good, but now she is in college, she's an 18-year-old. I mean, so far I would be with her in all her appointments. Now she's an adult technically, and she needs to understand the importance of the nutrition on her own. Like, things have changed. She's not getting any home cooked food anymore. She has to rely on the the dining hall food. But how does she make like good choices? So how do we make sure the dietitian would actually sit down with her, do a diet recall? Like, okay, what do you actually
them.
eat?
Ask them. Okay, any dietitian in the room who would deny that request, put up your hand. No.
We just have to know what you need.
We need to have the questions, because it's hard to go in, as a dietitian and say, hi, what are your questions today? Nothing.
Yes.
And where do you go?
That's the typical teenager and things, So I would actually encourage, like, maybe if, because the kids, they would not just say like, oh, whatever, they would not even ask them, like, what do you actually eat? I mean, as a parent, yes, I would, ask, but now she's on her own. And
it's hard having adult children.
yes,
I hear you. Yeah.
And we want to make sure that she is one of those kids who is not qualified for the modulators.
Yes.
And the last 4 years of high school were really challenging because she got CFRD, and then other things started happening, like, all downhill. But she has to realize that it is the nutrition that she needs. I mean, if I tell her like, hey, you need to eat this, blah, 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 but it's like, it just goes over her head,
Yes.
because it's mom just talking.
Yes, yes.
But then if
Yes
it's
to all.
coming, like, if the nutritionist can stress the importance of what she eats, I would say that would be really helpful. I mean, especially with the teenagers, because they would not take care of themselves. And this is my greatest worry since she's in college now.
Yeah, I really liked the slide that Liz put up about, here are all of the things that nutrition can do for you. What interests you? On this list. Maybe it's, your hair and nails. Maybe that's what, for an 18. I think for all of us, and thank you for your comments. And I hear your frustration with this. And it is a universal frustration for all parents of adults. And help guide us, and I think in our CF Center, one of the things that has been so valuable is that we've had parent voices, as we go through and put together committees and, present different opportunities. And so, make your voice heard, you may have more traction with the CF care providers than with your daughter, unfortunately, but you know what? From my experience, once they get to about 23, 24, you start getting some of those IQ points back. That's just me talking. But, I got down to the IQ of maybe a tree stump with my kids. And now my children, who are now in their 40s, I'm not that bad. Sometimes they'll even ask me for advice. Usually they want to give me the advice, but, that's another story. But hang in there, but make your voice heard and work with the CF team. I think that there are ways that we can address this, reach out. I don't know, maybe somebody will start a TikTok thing. Oh, you do? You've got one.
Not a TikTok. I just wanted to chime in that I work in a CF clinic, but I also work for a company called Nourish. And like my specialty on there is cystic fibrosis. So it allows that more one-on-one time with, especially more of the teenagers, where you can sit in a more comfortable environment and discuss ongoing health concerns or nutrition concerns versus just you have a 3-hour appointment, you're already exhausted.
That's right.
So there are other options, not just Nourish, but other outpatient options if they're not always feeling comfortable in the clinic setting. Just ask them
Thank
those
you.
questions.
That's a great asset.
Actionable things, you know, like, okay, this is the available dining hall food, and this is how you can make your choices from whatever is available. You know, so if I would just request all the RDs in this room, like, so please take time, like at least like to advise them
Thank
what
you.
really they can eat. You know, instead of just telling, okay, you should eat this, but they're not going to just think about it. They have already like a rigorous schedule, you know, plus they have to take care of their treatments. They're already sleep deprived now,
Absolutely.
you know, and nobody's telling them like, hey, you need this much sleep. I mean, except mom.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your input and your thoughts for the dietitian community.
Yeah.
And we're going to move on to the next speaker. If there are
you.
additional questions, the
Ask
speakers
me.
will all be available at the end.
Sure.
And
Thank
thank
you.
you so much, Katie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. All right. Our next presenter is, final presenter, Adam Bim. Adam was born with cystic fibrosis. He also has a brother with cystic fibrosis. He's somewhat familiar to me as he receives his care at Cornwall Health, Adult CF Care Center in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He currently works at Helen DeVos Children's Hospital, which is our pediatric affiliate, as a pharmacy technician and is studying pre-pharmacy at Grand Rapids Community College. Adam recently got back from a trip to New Zealand through Make-A-Wish, and he got to visit the Hobbit Shire, so very jealous. So thank you, Adam, for being willing to share your story.
Don't forget your water. Don't forget your water.
Hi, thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for Molly for reaching out to me. As she said, my name's Adam. I have cystic fibrosis, so does my brother. Neither of us qualify currently for any modular therapy. So, yeah, for financial disclosures, I have none. I'm just a person who has cystic fibrosis. So let's get right into it. A phrase I've heard more times than I can count is, "You're so lucky that you can eat whatever you want." On the surface, it might sound like a compliment, maybe even a little bit of envy. But for me, food has never been about freedom. It's about survival. Instead of choosing how much I want to eat, I have to eat as much as I possibly can to survive. So let's start at the beginning. I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis at just 7 days old. My older brother is 2.5 years older than me. He's always kind of done the hard things, I like to say. He's kind of paved the way for me. He's prepared my parents for all the struggles that we would face. Oftentimes, whenever we have a problem with insurance or getting a new medication covered, it's really easy to say, hey, my brother is also on this thing. It's covered. Literally look at his profile. We can figure it out. So yeah, I was diagnosed very early on. My parents were pretty prepared for the struggles that I would face. Some things they weren't prepared for, though, were struggles that I would face that my brother did not face. Early on in my life, when I was just a toddler, I was diagnosed with an aversion to food and a failure to thrive, which was something my brother had never experienced. Because of this, I was given a feeding tube, and I was sent to feeding school. I asked my mother how she felt about that, and she said it was heartbreaking. Imagine being told your child is starving because you can't get them to eat. It wasn't because she wasn't putting food on the table. It wasn't because she wasn't providing for me. It was simply because I want to eat the food that she was giving me. And that was a really hard thing to go through. And because of that, I was sent to feeding school. This was something I would go to for 3 months, Monday through Friday, for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And there I'd be taught to eat in circles. I would take a bite of B, a bite of A, a bite of B, then a bite of C. And something on the plate would be something that I really did like, and something on the plate would be something that I didn't like. And so it would encourage me to eat a bite of something that I really didn't like, to come back around the plate to something that I didn't like. Or did like, rather. Another way that they would encourage me to eat would be games. So we would play like, we'll do a round of Guess Who, and once we're done, you'll eat 5 bites of this. Or let's play Uno, and afterwards we'll do, 6 bites. And so that would associate food with something that was positive in order for me to incentivize me to eat. If that still didn't work, they would do this thing that I would call teeth tapping. I couldn't find any correct term for it, but they would take a spoon or a fork of food, and if I would refuse to open my mouth, they'd tap my teeth. And it would create an uncomfortable situation for me to get me to open my mouth in order to eat the food. And that sounds, harsh and kind of brutal. But the reality of it was I was hurting myself much more than tapping on my teeth ever would by not eating. I was also had a feeding tube at the time, which helped me get the calories that I was not getting otherwise. Specifically, at the time, there was no enzyme cartridges that you would put on the end of a feeding tube. And so I'd have to be woken up every 4 hours in order to take enzymes. And so that was quite a bit of a struggle for my parents and for me because I wasn't sleeping. And waking up a kid and trying to get them to swallow enzymes never really works very well. So cystic fibrosis is an invisible disease. You don't really see the struggles that are going on with somebody that has cystic fibrosis. And so oftentimes it's kind of hard to get those struggles across to people. Oftentimes, you explain to somebody, hey, I have cystic fibrosis, here's all these struggles that I have, and it's okay, but I never really see any of those struggles. It's very hard to quantify the schedule that somebody with CF has to somebody who doesn't experience it. One of those struggles is enzymes. It creates an extra barrier to food that would normally not be there for somebody. Oftentimes at work or school, I need to keep my enzymes in a designated place because they're drugs and people don't want me just running around with medications. And because of that, anytime that we bought pizza or somebody brought in donuts or hey, would you like a bite of this candy? Oftentimes I'll see myself saying no because I would have to go to my locker, grab my enzymes, and then come back up. And it creates just an extra barrier in order to get an extra snack that normally wouldn't be there. Another struggle is eating around treatments. I often say that I'm robbed of 2 hours of my life because of cystic fibrosis, because I have to do my nebulizers in the beginning of the day when I wake up and my nebulizers at the end of the day when I go to sleep. And so it creates a situation where, especially with work or school, the first thing I do when I wake up is my treatments. And so I'll be doing my nebulizers, and the first thing that will get cut is my meals. It's really easy to skip breakfast when you're running late because I can't do my nebulizers on the bus or in the car. I can't do them in the middle of my day, where I can make up calories later in my day instead. And it's hard to meet your calorie goals when you have cystic fibrosis in general, but it becomes a very arduous task when you skip a meal or you're skipping snacks. And it becomes nearly impossible for you to hit those calories that you really do need. I often struggle to remember to eat as well. Treatments aren't just a passive thing that you do. I don't just get asleep while I do them. So I have to be awake, and oftentimes I'll be watching a show or playing a game. And so when the nebulizers end, it's not like I'm not in the middle of something. So oftentimes I'll find myself, my treatment will end, and I'll continue doing whatever that is that I'm doing. And especially on days off, if you wake up later in the day, you do your treatment, suddenly it's 11 o'clock, you haven't eaten anything, and it becomes a real challenge to hit those calorie goals. For me, I've always been a very active child. I played soccer for 5 years, and then I played tennis for 2 years, and finally I did rowing for 2 years in high school. And I feel that it was very useful for creating structure in my life and also giving me a reason to be hungry. I find that I have a very poor appetite most of the time, but when food is placed in front of me, I never have a problem eating it. Because of that, when you have sports and you're very active all the time, it makes me hungry and causes me to eat, but at the same time, it means that you have to eat more calories than you would have otherwise. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. When I was in my senior year of high school, or junior year of high school, I joined the rowing team, and that was the first time I really locked in on nutrition. I saw it as a way to get stronger, to get better, to get faster. I really cared about how I was performing in the sport and what I could do to get better. I felt I was doing everything else I possibly could. I had practiced 5 days a week, competitions on the weekends. We were weightlifting twice a week. We had running sessions that we would have to go to. We would swim before school. I really felt like I was doing everything I could. And there was no reason to skimp out on nutrition when it was just as important for giving my body building blocks in order to perform better. I also felt that it helped me with planning. I've struggled to give myself time to eat meals during the day because it's really easy to just be like, oh, I'll eat when I'm hungry. But when you're distracted, you might not feel that way. And so when I have work or school, it gives me a designated time or 30 minutes to eat during my lunch break. And I find that really helps me in order to gain and maintain weight. When I have a structured schedule for my day, I eat breakfast, I eat lunch, I come home, I eat dinner, and it's very laid out for me. Sports also helped me with that, where during school, I would eat trail mix like religiously. Between classes, I would always have trail mix on me, and I'd always have my face full of it, just trying to reach my calorie goals. Also, because of sports, I started tracking my macros. And so I downloaded a nutrition app and I would track my calories. And I feel that really, really helped me in order to have a substantial qualitative data of what I was eating during the day. It's really easy to feel like you're eating enough when in reality you aren't. It's also really easy to have a meal such as dinner and be like, well, I ate so much during dinner. But if you skipped breakfast and had a small lunch and you didn't have any snacks during the day, you didn't really eat that much. From the outside, people will often be like, yo, you eat so much and you eat so fast. But if you are skipping out on meals or snacks during the day, then it's really easy to not meet those goals. And so the app really gives me qualitative data for that. I rely pretty heavily on nutritional supplements as well. Ensure specifically is the one that I take. And I find that it helps me to reach my goals, obviously. But with literally every single meal, I'll have an Ensure. Sorry, I choked. And yeah, I find that the nutritional supplements I rely on quite heavily in order to meet those nutritional goals. So right when I started my nutrition journey, what were the things that I would normally eat in a day? For breakfast, I would almost always have oatmeal and peanut butter. It's quick, it's easy. You make it with whole milk. Peanut butter has high calories. It's really good for somebody with CF. For lunch, I would always have something like a sandwich. I really love meal prepping for work, but often it's hard to find time to make a huge pot of food and then freeze it. But when I do, I have food for a month. And then I don't have to worry about it at all, and it's fantastic. For dinner, I normally eat things like pasta, and I rarely skip dinner. But sometimes, if I work a light shift, for example, I'll be at work until 11 o'clock. I have a 30-minute drive home. I'm home at 11:30. Then I have to do my treatments. I have to shower. I have to eat, and then I have to get ready for my next work day. And it's really easy to finish my treatments and be like, well, I don't really feel like eating. I'm so tired. I'm exhausted. I'm just going to go to bed. But something that helps me with that is my feeding tube. My feeding tube allows me to make up for those extra calories that I would otherwise skip out on during the day or that I would otherwise not be having. Once I started really focusing on nutrition, I kind of got thrown a curveball. During my senior year of high school, I had my first major lung infections. I had 5 hospitalizations within a year. I ended up losing 15 pounds, which is a lot of weight to begin with, but it's a lot of weight, especially when you only weigh 130 pounds to start with. I was throwing up every single day, constantly from coughing so hard. I would immediately start my day, I'd wake up, I'd be coughing immediately, and most of the time I would roll out of bed, go to the bathroom, throw up in the toilet, and that was kind of how my day would go. It caused me to have no appetite. There's constant treatments when you're in the hospital. People are constantly checking in on you. You get blood sugar checks before you eat, and it creates a lot of situations where getting the calories in that you need is really, really hard. In addition to that, you obviously have antibiotics that you're on in the hospital, and because of that, you really mess up the microbiome in your stomach, And so you have a lot of diarrhea, and it's uncomfortable, and it's just really hard to focus on eating when you feel so sick. Because of this, I ended up getting my second feeding tube. I literally reopened the old scar. It's exactly where it was before. And at the time, I felt like a failure. I thought to myself, I'm an adult. Why can't I eat enough to survive? I remember thinking, I wish something was physically wrong with me that I could point out to myself, and that was easier to solve. At one point, a friend asked me, why can't you just drink a protein shake before you go to bed instead of doing the feeding tube? And at the time, I didn't really have a good answer for him. I was like, why can't I eat 3 meals? Why can't I have my snacks? Why can't I meet my calorie goals? It shouldn't be that hard. I'm an adult. And at the time, I was just like, man, like it helps me out, blah, blah, blah. But thinking about it more, it's similar to, I think, an accessibility device. It is a crutch for me in order to help me reach my goals. And it's not as if I don't have something physically wrong with me. I do. My pancreas doesn't work. My secretions are thick and sticky, and it causes problems with my body. I have physical problems with me that just aren't visible to other people. And so accepting the fact that my feeding tube is just a crutch, it's something to help me reach my goals. It's not limiting to me. It doesn't show that I'm a failure. It shows that you're able to ask for help and that you're able to use this in order to better yourself and achieve those goals that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. Because of that, I reached the best weight that I've ever had. My entire life, I had always been under 140 pounds. I reached 150 pounds recently. I remember I was... Thank you. I remember I was jogging, and I could feel the arm fat under my arm like jiggle. And that has just never been an experience I had before. And I was like, oh my gosh, like there's weight on me, there's meat to me. And that's just never something that I had before. It had kind of just been, I'd accepted the fact that I was going to be skinny, and that was just the way that things were going to be, when obviously it doesn't have to be that way. And things constantly change for you, and you're able to reach those goals that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. And accepting that help is really important. So where am I at now? CF definitely challenges me. But life goes on. You've got work, you got school, you got sports, you got different goals than you would before. Doing treatments at work is definitely a struggle. That's inhaled aztreonam or Cystic, and you got to do it 3 times a day. Finding time to do that during the workday can sometimes be a problem, and finding a place to do it can be kind of odd. Oftentimes I'll end up doing it in the bathroom or the locker room, and people will walk in and it's kind of like, hey, that guy's like huffing something over there. And so you kind of got to explain like, hey, it's medication, like, not a big deal. Please don't report me. But so far it's been pretty easygoing. Most people, you'd be surprised how many people don't even ask and just kind of go on with their day. And I'd love to stand up here and say my relationship with food is great. I figured everything out. I'm the perfect human being. I've got no problems at all. But the reality is that, I still struggle to meet my goals. I'm not at the perfect weight that I would want to be at in order to reach that. But that's a reality for me. So what are my takeaways? I find that structure really helps me throughout my life. I find that sports have really taught me to be rigorous about the way that I go about things, and has taught me to be assertive about that. The feeding tube and tracking my calories are goals. They're not setbacks. They're not limiting me in the way that I do things. And I can eat whatever I want, but that doesn't mean you should be envious of me. Every meal, every bite is a small victory, and not one that looks like success from the outside. But that doesn't mean it isn't impactful. I've learned resilience and strategies that allow me to succeed with CF, and the challenges have shaped me, but it's still my life. And thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. That was very inspiring. Does anybody have any questions for Adam?
Hi, Adam. That was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I know the answer to this for some of my patients, but I'm just curious about your experience. I noticed that despite doing 2 feedings, you're able to have a breakfast.
Yes.
How do you make that happen?
So I do my 2 feedings overnight. I find actually most of the time with my tube feedings, I'm much hungrier in the morning than I would be otherwise. Like the tube feeding like kind of primes me to be hungry in the morning. But even then, I find that eating enough calories, as long as I'm not full, I will eat as much as I possibly can.
Are you on a shortened overnight schedule with your tube feedings, or do you run it over like how many hours?
Over 8 hours.
Over 8 hours. Okay, that's great. Thank you.
I have a question, Adam, and I feel like I should know the answer. But what app do you use for counting your macros?
I use Track My Macros.
Okay.
So it's free. You can buy a paid subscription, but I don't know why you would.
Okay.
There's a question on the app, and I think this is, maybe Adam can see what he thinks, or we can weigh in. From Melissa Goulart, I really enjoyed all the talks today surrounding weight, calorie intake, and body image considerations. How would one identify when it's appropriate to utilize tools like a nutrition app to give structure and feedback with intake? Sounds like it could be detrimental for some, but helpful for others, as Adam mentioned. Do you have an opinion on that, Adam?
Yeah, I always thought of it. I was actually recommended by a friend during rowing. It was a way in order for me to succeed. I didn't see it as a lot of people struggle with numbers and seeing their weight gain and seeing that as, oh, I failed. I only weigh this much, or I'm, not getting enough calories in and it's all my fault and I'm not priming myself. But I find that having that there as the reality is beneficial to me, at least, to be able to say, yeah, I didn't do a good job yesterday, but tomorrow's another day and I can always make up for that. And I have the rest of the week and I'm not going to die. I still get the rest of my life to change the way that I do things, and it gives you the opportunity to look back at that.
I think that's very insightful. My thought too would be, if you're thinking about that, but you're not sure, you would need to have whoever's going to do it to be motivated, because it can be very tedious. And if you're concerned that it would be detrimental, I'm assuming you mean from like focusing too much on the minutia, it would be something I would say, talk to your care team and see if there are resources. Because I do think that for some people, having it is helpful and it gives structure, like Adam. And for some people, if that's all they focus on, maybe they're missing some of the bigger picture, losing some of the joy in eating. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Last time on that? No? I think we're good.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
And thank you to all of our speakers and to all of the attendees. And I appreciate the families with CF that attended as well.